All right, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to week 3, the Scipreneur Smart Mobility Challenge. Hope homework wasn't too challenging for you. I see everybody submitted something into their folder. I've done a quick review of some of it, but we're going to go through all of it tonight. And I'm going to ask at least one person, if not the whole team, doesn't matter to me, for each group to present their problem statement. If you don't have your problem statement fully formed out yet, that's okay. We're going to continue to work on it as we move into a few more topics tonight. So we'll start off by reviewing the problem statements and move into solution framing, which is the other half of the two pieces of the problem solution. We'll go over market segments tonight, start talking about that and how to understand the different market segments. Then moving directly into customer discovery and start setting up the stage for next week's class, which is all about customers. So this class doesn't have as much in it as next week. Next week, we're going to be spending the whole 2 hours really talking about customers and digging deep into customer discovery, digging deep into the biases I mentioned last week, digging deep into how to build out personas and really a good understanding of customers versus consumers. But tonight I did want to cover some of the market segmentations and how to think about markets, because they are important when you're trying to kind of delve up who the customers and the consumers are. They're also important when you're trying to break down the solution and how the solution fits. But going back further upstream towards a problem and solution, what we're trying to do is establish with this problem statement and the solution statement as the basis for what your narrative is going to be. If we can get the problem statement into a concise, small set of sentences that you can say repeatedly and concisely every time to encapsulate the problem, then you'll be able to set the stage every time in every conversation with whomever you're trying to talk to about your product and about your problem. The idea is to always first set the stage for what the problem is. So you then can identify the person or people or market segment or a group of customers that are having that problem that will most benefit from your solution. So the problem statement really is kind of the cornerstone, the first hook, if you will, to connect with the audience that you're trying to sell to. In this case, it could be an investor, it could be the customers themselves, or it could be someone that you're trying to convince to allow you to have access to the customers. So we start with establishing that base, which is the hook, which is establishing what the problem is in a concise and adequate and appropriate fashion. Of course, then we need to discuss who the customer is in that regard, and then come back and say, and then the solution for that problem is X, Y, and Z. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So first, we're going to go through the homework, go through the problem statement, then we'll go directly into discussing the solution statement. And then your homework will be to completely or to finish refining your problem statement and make sure it matches up with your solution statement. So those are kind of in lockstep with each other and complement each other and supplement each other properly. Okay, so I hope I have representation from each one of the teams here tonight. We're a little light. I did get a few emails. This is spring break week for most schools and colleges and everything else. So I knew this week we'd have a light representation. If we don't get through everybody's problem statement tonight, that's okay. I'll send out some emails. We do also have office hours tomorrow. Go ahead and make that announcement. Tomorrow, March 17th, between 3 and 5. Just like last week, I did have a couple of people reach out to me, send me text or send me an email. Email is preferred at the email address that I'll provide for you at the end. Just reach out to me and say, hey, between this time tomorrow, I'd like 15, 20 minutes of your time if you don't mind. Of course, of course I won't. I'll carve out the time between 3 and 5 tomorrow to do that. Talk to anybody that wants that. I've also been contacted by a few of the IP holders. I told them to reach out to y'all directly and to make sure that they're at y'all's disposal. This is going to be great opportunities for collaboration. If you're having any trouble reaching out or getting in touch with your IP holders, please let me know. The contact information is in those folders that I shared with y'all. If you have any access problems for those folders, please also let me know. I'll make sure that's taken care of. The only other thing I wanted to kind of mention up at the beginning as we're trying to establish where our venue is going to be for our demo day at the end. It is going to be in Nashville. It's going to be a live in-person event. We'd like for everyone of you to be there if you possibly can in the Nashville area. It is also going to be virtually televised or broadcast event also. So if you absolutely can't be there, we can't accommodate you being there virtually to present. If the presenter or the main presenter can be there in person, that would definitely be preferred. But otherwise, we can accommodate. We'll work through that as we get closer to the presentation date and the demo date, and I'll field the questions offline about that if we have any issues with anyone being there live in person on the 27th of April for our final demo day event. Okay. As always, if you have any questions, let me open up the chat line here just so I can see if there's is. Yes, so Ugar, I will share the email with Jim after this call. Just if I don't remember, send me an email and I'll forward it to you, or I'll send an email to both of y'all. I'm making y'all an introduction. That's even better. So in fact, just because I'll probably forget with all the things, go ahead. You have my email address. I know we've passed emails back and forth. Go ahead and send me an email and I'll make an introduction between you and Jim. And Jim, would appreciate that. He's actually out of town for this event today, so that's why he's not here. But go ahead and do that. I'll make the introduction. Okay, so let me, I can do this two ways. So I have access to everybody's folders. I can share for you. We have 4 teams. I can go in order, or I can have a volunteer. If someone wants to come off of mute or come off of video, let me unpin my video here, and we can have the first volunteer. Anybody want to volunteer before I volunteer one of the teams to get started? Go over their problem.
I'll volunteer. We're team 3.
All right, Brooke, I appreciate that. So tamperware, anti-counterfeiting. Do you want me to share your problem statement? Can you walk through it?
Yeah, you can share it. That'd be good, yeah.
Let's get some things going here.
Would you like me to just read it, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So we weren't exactly sure what to put for the company name, so we went with 10Smart. So 10Smart, in partnership with Vanderbilt, aims to develop a method for validating the authentication of shipped items before, during, and after delivery. The method is aimed at preventing the swapping of products or boxes during shipment, with the objective of ensuring the integrity and authenticity of delivered items. The proposed solution will involve leveraging existing technology in new ways, such as electronic signatures. The solution will be implemented across all parties involved, including the shipper, deliverer, and the receiver. The need for the solution arises from the increasing incidence of product and box swapping during shipping, leading to losses for both the shipper and the receiver. Therefore, their goal is to provide a tamper-aware anti-counterfeit solution that ensures the delivery of authentic items to the intended receiver.
Okay. So tell me where the problem is. So what is happening causing the problem? And who is feeling the pain of that problem? And when?
The problem is like tampering with shipments, whether that be medical devices or designer goods, so and so. The solution would be their technology to prevent the tampering.
So let me rephrase it. So this is a solution-oriented problem statement, right? Because it's saying it's really worded in a way that is really presenting the solution inside the problem. And what we want is to actually set the big hairy problem out in the open without talking about the solution, right?
Okay.
So, and let me go back and say, look, when we're going through these exercises, I want you to know there's no grading, right? There's no A's, B's, C's, and D's. We take all the pressure off this, right? There's no bad things. There's no bad ideas, right? This is entrepreneurship. This is trying everything. This is learning from everything. This is the ultimate, like, no fail situation is a bad situation if you learn from it, kind of thing, right? So that being the case, right? So everything we discussed tonight is a learning situation, right? So the reason I'm saying it's solution oriented is twofold. And I'll also say maybe I should have talked about a little bit more, like, we're going to go to a solution statement next and say that these two work together in order to give a better narrative towards that kind of overall pitch, an elevator pitch. Like if you had to give a 60-second elevator pitch, what you would do typically is establish first the first 15 to 20 seconds, meaning the first 5 or 6 paragraph sentences, would be establishing the problem, right? Without talking about the solution at all. And as you can imagine, the first step would be to talk to someone and say, can you imagine, right? Can you imagine being in this problem? Can you imagine when you're a manufacturer of these products and you're expecting a large shipment of these highly technical pieces of equipment, and en route, they're circumvented, and you have now a portion of your allotment has counterfeit chips embedded into your overall lot. You have no way of tracing your original authenticated pieces of equipment. And now you have compromised equipment inside your lot that are now going to cascade through your manufacturing process into your final products and into your customers' hands. I said nothing about a solution there. I described in 3 or 4 or 5 sentences how a cascading problem starts with a penetration in my operational logistics, where I have no ability to continue my chain of custody around authentication around my products coming from upstream, that cascades the problem all the way downstream to my customer. That's a big, hairy problem. I've got you convinced, especially if I now go, but wait, I've got a solution. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for the feedback. We'll work on that definitely.
Yeah, so the good news is you kind of have your solution statement, all right? So like you've done this week's homework last week, and now you just need to take these two pieces together and really paint a very, bad picture around the problem, set the stage for it, and really kind of act like the antagonist in this plot line that you're trying to sew up in a 60-second act, if you will. And I like to talk about these things. Look, we probably all watch some sort of TV show or movie or anything else. And this is what we're trying to establish is a narrative. And you'll hear me say this quite a bit. You'll hear me talk like this a lot. We're establishing a plot line. We're establishing a hook. We're establishing a bad actor, and we're establishing a good actor. We're establishing a hero, and we're establishing a villain. We're establishing an antagonist and a protagonist, however you want to think about it. We want to set up a problem. We want to set up a customer that's having the problem, and we want to be the hero that comes in and alleviates that problem or provides that gain in some way. The problem statement establishes the problem and sets up the hook. The solution comes in like the hero and saves the day. So you have a solution kind of oriented already. So now let's go back and paint the big hairy picture with a problem this week as your homework.
Mm-hmm. And would you recommend going into great detail, kind of like how you described, where you go through how it affects, the company, the consumer, and everyone in the supply chain?
The word I'd play around with is great. It's like I can also be verbose, right? But the idea here is to be concise without being too, nondescript, right? So you want to paint a small story without being too wordy and too verbose, right? Because the idea here is like when we get to this, with this problem and this solution, and then after we figure out, also part of the homework to discuss is your customer segments, your market segments. Then after next week, when we talk about your customers specifically, those 3 pieces we're going to put together in basically an elevator pitch, and then that will encapsulate your 60-second elevator pitch. So you don't want to be too wordy. So, but right now you can be a little bit wordy, and we'll kind of make it a little bit more concise as we go along. So I'm saying lean into the detail at this point, and we'll kind of give it a diet as we progress.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, great. I think it's a good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, who's next?
Hi, this is Angelita. I'll go next.
Okay, great. What team are you on, Angelita?
Team 1.
Team 1, nanoparticle drug formulation. Great. Let me do one thing before I have another browser open. Okay. Sure. Okay. Do you see my screen, Angelita?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have okay, yeah. Why don't you just read the statement to us?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Cancer is a leading cause of death worldwide, accounting for nearly 10 million deaths in 2020, or nearly 1 in 6 deaths, according to the World Health Organization. The goal of cancer therapy is to identify patients at the earliest stage possible of the disease and to eradicate tumors without altering the overall health condition of the patients. Several studies prove that disulfiram, DSF, is an effective cancer treatment. There is documentation that DSF is capable of slowing tumor growth in cancer patients. However, DSF has a short half-life, hence a limited anti-cancer efficacy and failure in clinical trials. When administered directly, CUDDC, sub-2, I don't know what the name of it is, has low solubility, and therefore there is no formulation suitable for clinical use. There is a need for a more effective formulation of this copper complex that will solve these challenges.
This is good. This is good. And trust me, especially for those that aren't scientifically inclined, and y'all will need to practice some of these scientific element abbreviations and some of the long form terms for these. And as you heard from Chad Riggs the other night, who works at St. Jude and hears these and sees these terms all the time, and I've heard him say some of these words extremely successfully, and I have said them. I'm 50-50 on some of these words. It's difficult. Also, it is difficult to be a business person and kind of try to sell, you know what I mean by sell, like, you know, sell this and stuff like that. I will say you did a good job, Angelita, on kind of presenting this. And I also think this is worded quite concisely. Could it have a little bit more detail? It could. Does it need a lot more detail? It doesn't. To me, this is a concise problem statement, especially since I can see how the next part would be what we've seen from the presentation, which is how the solution and a little bit of the story of how the solution was discovered, which I think is an interesting part of the overall narrative around this piece of intellectual property, can really tell a story about how this is coming about to be a very viable formulation for cancer treatment in this regard. So this is a good example. It establishes kind of a hook of talking about statistically how many people this affects, how many people it affected at a given time, which is also good. So it encapsulates that into a given time. It establishes some credibility by talking about WHO, so we know where the information comes from. It talks about furthering that by saying and backing up with several studies. You don't have to put where these studies came from. Someone might follow up and ask you for those studies, so have that in hand as you're presenting these things. And I'm not necessarily talking about y'all. I don't think anyone is going to ask y'all for these studies. But if you were to run this company in real after this or be a part of this, then certainly they will. And in real world, if this is your company, you would have to have that. But it is talking about, look, there's lots of information about this, and there's no current formulation that is suitable for clinical use. So it establishes a baseline that there is actually no current solution for this, right? And then it says, you know, how? Well, there's a need for that, right? So it establishes the open door, kind of saying, look, there needs to be a solution, of which we can kind of guess at this point where the elevator pitch would start would be, oh, by the way, here's the solution. I don't know if I'd say, oh, by the way, but I would then go into the solution statement. So I think this is good. Good work.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, team number 3 or team, oh wait, no. Team number 4 or team number 2. I don't know if team number 2 had anything in their folder for problem statement. Team number 3 or team number 4? Who wants to go?
Hey, I'm from team number 4. We can go. We didn't actually yet get a chance to like all kind of talk and homogenize our work together, but I can kind of share mine, and I think there's okay.
Fine, that's fine. Tell me your thoughts.
Do you want me to share my screen?
It's up to you. I can make who's
okay.
talking?
I can share. Oh, it's me, Shannon Taylor.
Where are you on my show? Oh, there you are. Great. Let me make you co-host, and then you can share. How about that? And yeah, just walk us through your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'll share mine, but one of my teammates also had a really good thing, and I think had some features of what you said in the last one about including statistics.
Yeah,
But here's ours. So we're the lysosomal drugs for cancer team, and so I'll just read, I guess. Patients with a variety of primary cancer types develop metastatic disease when their cancer cells hijack lysosomal processes to evade chemotherapy and enable spread of cancer cells. Current therapeutic options do not directly target these specific processes. Targeted metastatic prevention has potential to improve survival times of patients with cancer and enable current therapeutics to better treat tumors. Metastatic transformation can happen before diagnosis or while a patient is already undergoing treatment for their primary disease, and treatment can be occurring at a specialized cancer center or at a local clinic.
yeah. Are you ready for some feedback, or did you have some more thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah.
I guess more thoughts. I can, if Jordan wants to jump in and share anything, or
Yeah, Jordan,
yeah,
you
I
an
don't
email
know.
saying you had gone a couple of different directions, Jordan, if you wanted to add anything. Jordan, are you on mute?
Oh, sorry. Yes. I don't actually have mine up to be able to confidently reference the statistics from it.
I just have yours pulled up here if you want to look at it, if my screen is sharing
Oh,
properly.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I had actually just been hearing about the fact that we're really beating a lot of cancer statistically, but that's because we're beating broad categories and that we're gaining very little ground in newly discovered areas of cancer. And that's why there's this constant and changing field that's needing these targeted therapies, and that hopefully, lysosomal may target one of those specific new cancers more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so I would combine some of these things too. So I think the two parts make up the whole when it comes to a problem statement that I've seen here between your two. I like adding some of these numbers I'm seeing from this part into the other things, just to kind of add some validity to and structure and kind of the overall volume aspect of what we're talking about. The one thing that you just said, Jordan, I think is also important and almost can be conveyed that, and maybe not this part, just hear me out before we kind of decide on what might be the nugget here. There's large scale cancers that have been eradicated over the last 40 years because they were so prevalent in our society. I mean, these are the ones that St. Jude and the cancer institutes went after absolutely first, because they were killing millions and millions and millions of people. What we've gotten to are very specific niches over the years of highly specialized cancer areas that still kill hundreds of thousands of people. They're the most deadly of the cancers. They are also statistically much lower than the Hodgkin's and some of the other lymphomas, right? But they're also very deadly, and they're very painful, and they kill quickly, right? So we're getting this point now where we're starting to really almost like having the sniper effect these cancer treatments with very specialized treatments, very specialized formulations. So it's not any less important to go after these cancers just because the numbers are starting to dwindle, like you have discovered. It's now even more specialized, and because of technology, we're able to go after these things in a more concise and specific kind of fashion. So, setting the stage for how special some of these cancers are and how special the technology that needs to be brought to bear in some of these cases could actually set the stage for how special this product is, how special this solution is. Did that make sense where I was kind of leading to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think combining something, a little bit of what I just said, but in probably a tenth of the words, and then also adding some of the numbers here, and they're still big numbers, by the way, with the other part that established some of the narrative. I think you have a good, solid, very kind of properly structured problem statement.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, so team 3. Is anyone here from team 3?
Hello.
Was that
So I'm guessing this is for the wireless power one. So
yeah. Were you able to meet
I
with
just
your team
put
at all, Juliana?
yeah. Yeah, we met this morning. I just put my statement
Okay.
in the chat. I didn't have the chance to upload it to the doc beforehand, but basically, so I did a nice and simple problem statement.
Do you want
So
me? Do you
that
want to share
is,
it? Can I make you a co-host so you can show it?
it's in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat. Okay, go ahead. I see it right now. Go ahead and read it.
So what I said is charging speed currently poses a barrier to the adoption of electrical vehicles, with the time to charge electrical vehicles using the fastest chargers, that is level 3, being 3 times longer than the time to fill up the tanks of fuel-based vehicles, that is 30 minutes versus 10 minutes. Hence, there is a need for higher power charging systems.
Okay, I think that is a very concise problem statement. Is that the only part of the problem, though? Is it also, I mean, so charging speed currently poses a barrier to the adoption of electric vehicles, with the time to charge electric vehicles using their fastest chargers, level 3, being 3 times longer. Your solution, is that is it just about charging speed?
No, there's definitely other factors where it's a wireless charging system, so that
So
would
with
mean
access, so like the
yeah,
other problem is
improves that.
there's only one hookup, right, for a level 3, and you have 5 cars out there. Would a wireless system be able to do all 5 cars?
Well, based on the pattern, so I'm still trying to understand the pattern, but I'm
Okay.
not sure if it's like a full-on large-scale pad where like multiple cars can just park into.
Yeah.
Yet, based on the picture, it seems like it's just one car at a time right now, but based on the technology, I think it could definitely be expanded.
Okay, so that's where I'm gonna hook you. Tomorrow, I'm gonna make sure you get in. Have you talked to the IP holder yet?
Not yet. So I actually emailed him today. Haven't heard from him yet, but
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna ping him tomorrow, make sure you have access to him, so you can ask him more questions about that, because that's where I want to expand. I want to make sure that because I think this is very good and very concise, right? I think it's also, we can add to it and kind of build a bigger picture of like when, it's almost like when electrical vehicle car owners need to charge their vehicle quickly because they're in a time constraint. Yet they go to a charging station and there's already a line of 3 cars for the level 3 charger. They know not only do they have to wait in line, but they're going to have to wait 3 times, as long, it kind of set the stage from a narrative perspective about who is feeling that problem, not just the car. The car is not feeling the problem, right? The car doesn't care, right? It's the EV owner that's feeling that problem. So we might want to flesh this out a little bit to kind of give the perspective of who's feeling the pain. And also, if it's a little bit more, like if the problem's a little bit bigger than just the charging time, is it charging access? That's also the problem, right? So let me also ping the IP holder and the tech transfer office tomorrow to make sure you get access. And you can kind of expand upon this a little bit more.
Yep, I'll make sure the next one is more customer centric.
Yeah, that's exact. Thank you. That's perfect words for it. That's it. Okay, so I said I wasn't going to give you all a grade, but I'm going to give you all an A. I think it was a great effort. I really do. I actually thought about something, so I'm just going to take a small tangent into AI world tonight. Okay, and this is going to take a very short period of time, so bear with me. Well, I guess you don't have to bear with me because it's going to take a short period of time. So I want to challenge everyone. So as you're building out your problem statements and solution statements and your elevator pitch, I would like someone, if you so are inclined, to take all that rawness that you are building and dump it into Chat GPT-4 and see if they give you a really nice elevator pitch. Just ask it to give you an elevator pitch. So get whatever you get to, give it into Chat GPT-4 and let's see how good of a entrepreneur it is and building a very concise problem and solution statement. So if anybody's so inclined to give that a try, I'd be curious, but go ahead and be honest about it and say that they did it. So let's do an experiment with Chat GPT-4. Okay. All right, so let's move on. Any questions about the problem statement? Oh, okay. Okay, so we went over the problem statement. We're going to jump into the solution statement tonight, talk about market segmentation. We're going to jump into something we're going to spend more time with next week, but I wanted to go ahead and cover tonight because we have so much to cover next week. around customer discovery and market discovery. And then we'll discuss your homework, which is something we already talked about. It's a solution statement. A few of you are kind of a little bit further into that on your way, maybe by accident, but it's still good. And then we'll conclude for the night, probably finish a little bit early, if I had to guess. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll discuss them along the way. Raise your hands, come off mute, start waving your hands. I can't see everybody's video feed, but certainly make some noise if you have questions. I can happily stop. Otherwise, as you know, if you were on last session, I'll just keep drawing on until I'm done. Okay, so we've already gone through the problem statement. We can skip through some of this. Let's really go into the solution statement because this is where the problem and the solution meet up with each other. A little bit different than the who, what, why, when, where. The typical solution statement format is for the target audience of U, who needs, B, the new product, W, the solution that will do X, unlike the alternative Y. Our solution does Z, right? So it's like, what is our solution does this for them, and it does it this way, and it does it this better than this other, and so on and so forth, right? And it's just a very concise statement that makes a bold stance on what it does, why it does, who it does it for, and just really connects well with that problem statement. It's talking specifically about a target audience. It states that target audience very clearly. It might even go into the demographics of that audience. It is specifically focused towards this group. It characterizes this group because the idea of it is really focused on a group of individuals that is going to find value the most from what you're trying to sell. We talked about this last week. I think I mentioned this. If you're building a product for everyone, as the adage goes, you're building a product for no one. Again, you may be lucky over a large period of time where your product can be utilized by everyone in the world, all 8 billion people, but that is extremely doubtful. Could you get half of that? Yeah, maybe, but that's a long time coming, and it's also extremely doubtful. So you're going to have to segment your customers, and you're going to have to figure out a way to get to certain of those customers earlier than others. And there's always, and we'll talk about this next week, the chasm and crossing the chasm. There's different segments of customers and how to get from one group to the next. And you have to understand which ones are early and easier to get to, and which ones are harder to get to, and how you get to those, and so on and so forth. So you definitely have to start off with a target audience. So there's a question here: is the target market for cancer drugs the insurance company? That's a good question. I mean, I think we're going to dive a little bit more into that in a later conversation and in next week's. But part of something for cancer treatments is understanding how those cancer treatments get to the end consumer. So we talked about that a little bit last week too. For a cancer patient with a cancer treatment, that cancer patient is the end consumer for sure. Yet, regardless if they're paying something out of pocket, the insurance provider is paying for the treatment. The person or group ordering the treatment is the hospital. So are they part of the customer solution, customer journey? Yeah. So it's the insurance company, it's the hospital, it's the inpatient, right? It's also the pharmaceutical company creating that. They're the service provider for that and the product provider for that. It's all the individuals in between. It's the third party that's in between, that's bundling that or servicing that in between the hospital and the pharmaceutical company. So there's all these different things that could be in the customer journey that also have to be identified. So saying the insurance company is part of that target market is also true, but they're only one component of that target market. So that's a good question. Oh, wow. Got a big question here now. So let me, okay, for the ChatGPT challenge, I'm gonna come back to that, Juliana. I appreciate that. Okay, so moving back to the solution statement framework. Okay, so the who, statement of need for the opportunity. Describe what the target is trying to achieve, to do while he's having the problem. Rather than state the problem directly, state the need your target audience have the opportunity to meet. That will state of the need or the opportunity to describe what the target is trying to achieve by using your solution, right? So when they use the solution, they're going to get this. That's what it's trying to do. The name of the new product or business. So it's saying what the business is, saying what the product is. This is what we do. This is what we are. This is what we are. So in that problem statement, there's more solution oriented. That's how that first sentence is. Part of the 10 Smart Solution Consortium. We are doing this. This is what we're doing. This is our business name. This is what our solution does. This is what our solution name is. Statement of key benefits. Our solution does this. It is great at doing this. It fixes this problem. Highlight what the solution offers that will motivate our most interested audience. This is the time for you to highlight the highest things. This is the time for you to highlight everything your solution does. No, this is the time for you to highlight the biggest parts of what your solution does for a target audience, right? So the idea here is between the solution statement is to really understand the parts that you drew out in your problem statement to make sure that your solution statement responds to those things. Of course, your solution can do a lot more than just fix that one problem, but you don't want to get into this kind of what you may believe is a virtuous cycle, but really becomes a vicious cycle of losing track and losing touch of what your original narrative was that you're trying to convince the one target audience of what you're trying to sell, because they might not need all those other things, or they might not care, okay? But someone else in that customer journey might, and you might need to add that to that kind of narrative later. But for right now, we're trying to keep very concise to what the problem statement is saying, okay? And also in a solution statement, if in some situations, talking about what the competition is doing or how you're doing it better, it can be effective when you're talking about the solution statement or statement of framework. So this, unlike primary competitive, unlike so-and-so, we do it this way. So if there is something out there in the market that is doing something that you're trying to disrupt, bringing it up in the solution statement can also be effective, right? So we're starting off to talk about what we are and who we are, what our solution does, who it does it for, why we're better than our competitor, and what are our key benefits. That's really what we're trying to do, is sell our solution to an individual to say that we're better than anyone else, and this is why. Okay, and so again, primary differentiator, distinguish the sell solution beside the fact that it meets the most critical need, but are other interesting, attractive features that are included. List the key marketing points or functionality for the address the problem statement, establish why stakeholders would want or need this function, and what the steps, what sets it apart and what differentiates that. So, if it is something that's truly disruptive, something that is very novel, in some cases, you're going to have to explain to them why it is needed also. So let me back up a little bit. Like in some cases, and this happens more and more every day, you don't have a competitive landscape to say you're better than. In some cases, you might be so novel that there's no competition to compare yourself against. That's a good place to be in and a bad place to be in. If you're so breakthrough, how do you say you're better than everyone else when there's no one else around? If you're so breakthrough and disruptive, sometimes you have to re-educate individuals on why your product is what is needed. There's a lot of things that relate to just pure timing that can help you with that. So for example, where we were pre-COVID for telemonitoring and telemedicine, hospital at home, as it's being more widely known these days and used term these days, most people didn't care. Hospital capacity and bed availability wasn't something that was overly discussed. Now during COVID and post-COVID, that is one of the largest growing, burgeoning markets in the healthcare industry, with it being $830 billion industry by 2025. That's a huge area of opportunity that wasn't there just 4 or 5 years ago. The need was there. The number of sick people, believe it or not, if you take the COVID, just the number of deaths and sickness out of that mix statistically, the same thing is still here. We still have the same numbers going through this. In fact, we're at the same capacity issues, but the situation is now more dire because we now know the technology is there, and we now know how much we really should be doing more hospital at home. So when we talk about numbers, and there was 30 million people that went to the emergency room last year, and only 3 million people were allowed to be admitted, leaving 27 million people to go home, that means a lot of people needed to have hospital at home. So now telemonitoring and telemedicine is becoming this big, huge deal. Electronic vehicles. Electronic vehicles were first introduced in California in the early 80s, okay? That changed for a lot of reasons, but the technology was there in a space that was probably highly likely would establish a foothold, right? It didn't for a lot of reasons, but it could have, right? And it took 35 years for it to reestablish itself, or 30 years for it to reestablish itself. Now it's like no one can stop this train from going down the tracks anymore. So things happen for a reason, and they can be disruptive, and certain things have to be on a timing situation, and certain things have to be even explained for them to happen this way, right? So as Elon Musk has been doing for the last 6 years, and say what you will about him, the fact is like he has been disrupting many industries over the last 10 years, and he's had to educate us in many ways on why these things are needed in our society. And when I say educate the government on why we need electronic, more grid infrastructure, to start boring tunnels for transportation on long haul train networks and underground train networks that he still hasn't built. Side note. But the idea there is like everything is starting to change. Now Ford has to take advantage of this, start doing things, and Volkswagen doing things. So he's flipped the script on everything because he kind of pushed the dime on this new thing, even though it's an old thing, but this new thing to kind of move it forward. And he really disrupted the entire market and made everyone start taking paying attention to it. And now everyone in the entire industry is moving into that direction, right? So you have to kind of sometimes establish an industry to build an industry, to be a part of the industry. And that means you have to differentiate yourself from everything. So then you have to establish why you are the best thing to set foot into this earth of this industry, right? What is your thing that's so special that you can start this industry where no one else could? And believe me, that's difficult, but it does happen. And with technology these days, that is going to happen over and over again. And in sciences, it happens every day. I mean, if we talk about one of the 4 things we have here, or 2 of the 4 things we have here, or even 4 of the 4 things here, about having the ability to significantly increase the charging time of a battery, or track products anywhere in the world within microseconds, or 2 cures for cancer, or formulation for cancer. I mean, these are groundbreaking, earth-changing things. That should be easy to talk about how you can differentiate yourself from other things, right? This is where you play particular attention to building out the big win that is your solution. So the first part, coming back around to it after that long tangent, the first part is about establishing the big hairy problem. This part is about knocking it out of the park with your winning solution. Okay, so problem statement, solution statement. They go hand in hand, and they make up the 2 bookends around your customer to become what is really your elevator pitch. The only thing that's not in your elevator pitch is a little bit about value proposition, and we're going to talk about that next week. Okay, and again, your elevator pitch is just that short little 60-second sales pitch that you're going to utilize when you're telling anybody about your product or your business. And that could be someone in the elevator that's just asking you what's up today, what you're working on, or it could be that investor, or it could be someone who you want to be a potential customer. Okay, and that's what we're getting to. And once we get to that elevator pitch, what we'll build upon from there is the larger pitch. That's your 7-minute pitch that we're going to do for the demo day. And that's probably the time we'll have is 7 minutes to do a demo day pitch, right? And we'll start building from that elevator pitch. We'll build from the problem statement. We'll build from the solution statement for the larger pitch. So that's why we're doing all this. That's why we're going through this effort. Okay. Any questions about the solution statement? Okay, let's read this ChatGPT output here. Electric vehicles, EVs, offer a clean and sustainable alternative to conventional vehicles, but they face challenges such as limited battery range, long charging times, and dependence on charging cables and stations. A wireless electronic vehicle charging station can overcome these challenges by enabling EVs to charge without the need for a cable or human intervention. A WEVCS uses electromagnetic induction to transfer power from transmitted coil installed to a ground to receiver coil at the bottom of the EV. This technology can increase the convenience, safety, and efficiency of EV charging. Blah, blah, blah. Startup risk can provide emission. I think this is, so Juliana, I think this has kind of got some of the tone I'm asking about, but it needs more detail about your product. So since ChatGPT is conversational, talk to it a little bit, add a little bit more flavor about what your product actually does. And I bet you after a few more interactions back and forth, you can get this problem statement pretty locked in. So since you picked up the gauntlet, keep working with ChatGPT, and I bet you'll get to a problem statement. But do it offline for next week, because otherwise I'll just keep wanting to jump into ChatGPT with you. So it's one of my favorite pastime hobbies these days. Okay, so let's go into what is your market, and it's really about market segmentation. There's a good statement: you can't eat an elephant in one bite, right? And I think I know I did. I talked about Henry Ford's statement, great saying last week, about nothing's too difficult or complex when broken up into small enough parts or pieces, or however you want to think about it. That's really what market segmentation is as well. You can't go out and get a mass market up front. You have to go get these in chunks. And a good chart I'll show you next week that's called Crossing the Chasm, or it's basically a bell curve of how customer segmentations are. There's this early group, there's these early adopters and innovators that are the easiest to go get, but they're also this part of the smallest group of individuals. But those are the ones that kind of will glom onto something very, very early. They don't care if it's fully polished or not, especially in technology, especially people like myself who will buy early technology, even if it's a little bit buggy and kludgy. Those are easy to go get, but there's a chasm between those early adopters and those innovators to the mass market, the early majority, the people that are a little bit more discerning, actually a lot more discerning, and want something polished, no bugs, no anything else. That's hard to go get, right? So that's one type of thing of like looking at markets as how am I going to entice those people to go get things? But there's also looking at markets of like, what are all the types of slices that I have to look at to understand how to segment these markets and how to understand these markets. So we talked about a few of those dynamics last week around demographic and firmographic and psychographic and everything else. And we're going to talk about those in a little more detail tonight. But then we also talk about niche kind of segmentation. So it's like, is it a multifaceted segment where there's a couple of different customers, like we talked about earlier, where there's an insurance provider and then there's a hospital and there's a patient. And sometimes there's a B2B and a B2C, which we've talked to about those, and also direct to consumer. So we're going to go through those in this part, and we'll also talk about market and customer discovery as we tail into the final parts of tonight's session. Okay. All right. So market segmentation is pretty easy. It's dividing similar customers into homogeneous groups for the sake of classification and study. That's basically what we're doing here. We want to thoroughly understand what customer segments or what market segments will be truly best for our product or for our marketing of our product. And remember, we might want to market to one group in order to entice the other group to utilize our product. Meaning, in some cases, like, for example, kids products, we want to market to the parent in order to provide for the kids. In some cases, we want to market for the kids in order to entice the parent to buy for the kids. Cereal is a good example. We want to market to the kid for the cereal. But in some cases, we want to market the nutritional value to the parents, right? So there's that kind of multi-pronged marketing thing. Simple example around cereal, kids, and everything else. With medicines and stuff like that, healthcare, it's really different. It might want to market to the patient, might want to market it to the doctor. In some cases, a lot of products, especially healthcare related to prosthetics and different implants, they have found marketing to the patient is better than marketing to the doctor. Having the patient go to the doctor and ask questions about it turned out to be a better marketing cycle than actually marketing to the doctor, who's then trying to sell to the patient, who doesn't really have time or the skill to be a salesman to the patient, but actually informing the patient of a better hip or a better knee or anything else was a better idea. So they started marketing to the patients themselves as they were aging and needing into these new devices of saying, hey, would you like to walk better? So on and so forth. And pharmaceutical companies, obviously, you can't go buy pharmaceuticals directly. You have to go to a doctor, but they've been marketing pharmaceuticals to us for decades, right? So we buy all our pills by going and asking our doctor for whatever we want. And that's generally how we're doing things too. So this is all about understanding the customer, understanding how to market those, and so on and so forth. So let's just dive right in. Okay, so understanding the customers and having consideration for these segments is pretty important. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of consider them. We talked about these in the high level last week. We'll go in a little bit more detail. There's some great material in Google about this, just looking up market segmentations or customer segmentations. We'll get that for you. So geographic, obviously, pretty easy to understand. customers are grouped based on locations. The things that we like here and not the things that people like over in other areas. I think there's some great, hugely funny examples of watching Australians and British people eat American snacks and vice versa. I mean, us eating bangers and mash is funny to watch. And then them eating biscuits and gravy and then calling it scones and sauce and stuff like that. It's just completely understand. Yeah, it's hilarious to watch them, but that's very geographic, right? We have very specific tastes. They have very specific tastes. They wouldn't market things the same way we market things. In fact, we have, but also at the same time, we have things that are the exact same here, like completely different packaging, completely different marketing, but it is the exact same there, but it's completely different packaging, completely different marketing. So even though some things are by taste, they're both geographically different, right? And that's based on geography or based on some other consideration. So geography plays a big part of it. Also, regulatory geography. So there's certain things that are allowed in certain areas and certain things that aren't allowed in certain areas. And it's not about the regulatory about those things, it's about the conditioning of that regulatory in those geographic areas. People just aren't aware of that. It's like gum in Singapore is not something you're going to have a conversation about with people because gum is not allowed in Singapore, right? So, I mean, there's the law, but that also affects the marketing of that and just the productization of that product or even those kinds of products in that space. I know that's a weird example, but if you start to think about those things, one is a consumer product that's affected by something that's in a different geographic space, right? So because of other regulations and other guidelines. So there's that kind of space, right? Demographic. So customers are grouped based on certain characteristics, may include ethnicity, gender, age, marital status, education, occupation. These are all the things that we slice and dice people. This is not judgmental. These are just purely the data, right? These are the facts around how people are grouped around their demographics. That's it, nothing into it, right? But there's the gender, there's the age. These are, married couples, doesn't matter if they are, in fact, it does matter sometimes. These can be, who they're married to, what they're married to, they have children, do they not have children, what the mix of their children are, the age of their children, because you might be marketing those children. You might be marketing this very specific types of, age groups of children, young children, older children, and babies. We've had every year, except for this year, actually, the last 3 years before this, we've had various products every year for very young infants. Very helpful. We had one talking about this for young children that might have been, abused, and this was a scan to help find out if they were abused because of their retinal hemorrhaging. Right? We have to understand that that was a product that was going to be marketed towards adults with children of a certain age. Right? So those are a part of that group. So we do have this slicing and dicing of considerations around demographics. Behavioral. Customers are grouped by the native and learned preferences. We're going to talk about some of this next week with native and cognitive biases, but these are customers grouped by their native and learned preferences, right? They prefer certain things this way or prefer things certain that way. Firmographic, same as you focus on organizations. So these are typical of groups or entities. These can be affinity groups. These can be corporate groups, business groups, municipalities, government organizations, religious organizations. They can be community organizations, cultural organizations, but they are groupings of individuals that actually have a common belief or a common approach to life or a common approach to something, right? They're going to have buying behaviors based on that group affinity. Psychographic intersection of behavioral tendencies and core beliefs. Again, this is probably aligned with an affinity group of sorts, but those are kind of psychographic. They're all kind of mentally intersected between their behavioral tendencies. And a SMART group is a combination of any one of those that we've talked about earlier. So if you look at these segmentation considerations, and again, this is data science, right? This is literally looking about how do we break up small or larger groups into smaller groups. Do we do this by demographics? I'll give you some examples. So the last company that my co-founder and I had was in the real estate industry. So I haven't always been in life sciences, although this was a technology, but it was for real estate agents. So right there, I just segmented a group by occupation. And we did that in also, we started off in Tennessee. So now I'm in geographic, but we started off in Tennessee because that's where our product was aligned with the policies and regulations for Tennessee and the Mid-South area, right? So we had something that was by occupation, by groups, because we sold it to a specific organization, right? So we were slicing and dicing. And then we started looking at data, and we realized that we wanted to grow into other geographic areas. We started looking at the data, and we started realizing that some of the way the realtors did things in Tulsa, Oklahoma were really considerably different than the way they did things in Memphis, Tennessee, right? So, it's kind of a short, small example, but we were looking at things by different geographic locations and how their policies were driven around how those realtors really did their business, how they did their, their signs in their front yards, and how they worked with their vendors, and how they worked with their clients, and the materials that they provided to their clients, because we were doing some things related to digital transformation in that regard. So we really dug deep into kind of slicing and dicing the market segmentations by a couple of different ways. And I've had other businesses that focus on different levels of age groups, right? So we were looking for very specific groups of individuals that had kids between the ages of 0 and 6, because it was a literacy app. We were building an app that taught kids how to read. So we started off initially looking for kids between 0 and 18, but we realized that was a really large segmentation of books. So we started off and went back to 0 to 8, and then we wound up settling on 3 to 6, just so we could get a better, smaller segmentation for our initial rollouts. Our MVP only had 3 years of books. But guess what? Our marketing had to look like it was for the kid, but marketing actually for the parent, right? So it had a great cheetah that my wife developed. She was actually a part of the business too. She's my co-founder. And so we built this, well, we were contractors for this company actually, but she was part of it. So she built this part of the app, and I built the rest of the part of the app that actually taught these kids how to do some literacy education. And we really had to focus the marketing around both the parents and the kids. So it was very interesting. It was a great app, and it's continuing to be built out, and it's really kind of cool. But it was a really interesting exercise in really segmenting clients around a lot of different considerations. So when you're looking at this, and we're starting to build the model that is going to be the customer segmentation, the customer and consumer kind of aspects, whereas we work on this value proposition setting next week, keep these things in mind when you're looking at who you're trying to segment. So for the cancer things, yes, it's easy to say these are for cancer patients, but when you're starting to break down the overall model and the go-to-market model, you got to understand there's segmentation of their customers. And when you start marketing these things, you got to understand that there's ways to market, and it might not just be that straightforward. We got to go strictly to the cancer patients. No, it might actually be, we have to go this other way around to get to what we need to do. Okay. All right. So there's some segmentation types too. These are about, so the way we slice and dice those other segmentation considerations, we're looking at them by large groupings related to their tendencies, right? Related to the way they look at things, the way they would group themselves based on affinities or tendencies or behavioral models. These are more around how they would group themselves and truly their buying statistics, right? So there's the mass market, the things that we all use, aspirin, paper, computers, technology. We all use them. We might use different flavors. There's iPhone versus Android, doesn't matter. It's a smartphone market. It's a mass market for a smartphone. And there's two slightly smaller mass markets in there for iPhone and Android, right? But they're mass market, right? Then there's niche, and niche doesn't mean small, but it does mean cater to a specific market. So it's a much, much smaller market. So there's, if you want to carry on the smartphone, there's the Google One phone, and there's a couple of other smaller phone manufacturers, but they're still Android, right? So they still fit inside the Android model. So you really can't say they're too far off. And there's a couple of smaller phones that have their own operating system. And I would say probably those are truly niche areas. But the niche ones is really just a very specific customer segment. Again, it doesn't have to be small. So for the specialized cancer, yeah, that's going to be a niche, but it could be 600,000 people in that niche market. So it doesn't have to be small, right? Segmented, those are where you have a model that distinguishes between segments with slightly different needs and problems. So you have a couple of groups, but they are only segmented ever so slightly, but you do have kind of specialized, diversified. They're different, but you have a product that can kind of work over fluid. So serving two or more unrelated customer segments with very different needs and problems. So you might have solutions that would go for this group that are different from this group, very different from this group. So you have a large group, diversified portfolio of customers because you have a diversified inventory of products. And then multi-sided, serving two or more interdependent customer segments. So with the healthcare products, a lot of them are multi-sided. So you have tiers of customers. Going back to the real estate one, it was a very multi-sided because where it turned out was we were going to sell to one customer and then they were going to sell to their customer. So we had a multi-sided where we were very dependent on them selling our product to their customer because we wanted our product to get into their customers' hands, but we had to do it two-sided first. So it was 1 to 2, A to B and B to C. So it's kind of multi-sided, right? So these are kind of how we sell things and how we kind of divide up those markets. So there's a big one, the mass market, niche, a lot smaller, but doesn't have to be small. Segmented, just they're slightly different, but they're kind of all a little bit interrelated. Diversified means they're not related. They're definitely segmented apart from each other. And multi-sided meaning they're kind of interdependent and segmented together. So I have to sell to one, sell to the other, or kind of do it in another fashion, but they are interdependent between each other. Okay. Any questions about segmentation? Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to jump into market discovery and just discovery in general. All right, so being your inner scientist or being your inner detective, being your inner 3-year-old, it doesn't matter. This is what we talk about when we talk about discovery. And this is actually my favorite thing to talk about. All of this is my favorite thing to talk about if you haven't already guessed. But this is really where I really enjoy my time as an entrepreneur is in the discovery phases, because it either means that I get to figure out if I'm crazy or not, right? If my idea is just stupid or it's something that has value. If my idea is something that I'm the only person that has a problem with it, or if I am not the only person that has this problem and what I'm thinking as a solution is marketable or viable, or someone else might think it's a good idea. It's like my litmus test on whether I'm insane or not sometimes, I think. And I think discovery is a great way of doing that. And I like to think of it kind of in that scientific method that I learned when I was in chemistry in 8th grade, right? Of just kind of being observant, talking to people, asking them about what they think about the problem, seeing if they have the same problem, and then starting to kind of socialize the solution and really kind of being that detective to figure out if my solution is going to work for the problem that is more than just my problem. So how do we do that? It's a lot of observation. It's really kind of looking at and trying to define what the phenomenon is, what the problem is, what the market need is, developing a hypothesis about the solution to the problem, what the business idea is, and conducting experiments to test that hypothesis and getting out of the building to go see that. One thing that I think is going to be enjoyable to talk about next week is those biases. I've picked several of them out to talk to y'all about next week that I think are pretty fun to talk about because we all have them. There's a list of 50 and trust me, there's actually one in there where if you try to debunk these 50, it pretty much debunks you debunking these 50 because everybody has biases. You cannot not have biases. These are the things that you look at and go, I don't know if I believe you or agree with you. Well, the reason you don't believe me or agree with you is because you have a natural bias, right? Because of the way you've had your upbringing, the way you see life. And that's okay. You're supposed to have those biases. You came by them naturally, right? But you got to test those, right? And as an entrepreneur, you have to look past your own biases to take in the constructive criticism to know if your problem, your solution are worth following or are they viable or not. So there's a lot of observation. We talked about this last week of kind of turning up your a little bit of the extroverted type of, inside of you and turning down the introverted side of you a little bit, just to kind of put yourself out there to ask people about these things, to get more information. And they might not have the problem that you have, but at least talking to them about them and getting feedback for what just for example, just sharing the problem statement with a complete well, I shouldn't say complete stranger because they might think you're really, really weird. What I'm saying is like a friend, a cousin, a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister. But when I say complete stranger, I mean a complete stranger to what you're talking about. But just, hey, just let me read my problem statement to you and getting the feedback for what they think and if they understand it. That's very, very valuable. So even that kind of observation and feedback and testing is very, very valuable. You'd be surprised talking to someone who you would think is not connected to what you're doing and just honing in on your problem statement to the point where you really have a complete layperson understanding what you're saying. That is validating to you to say, okay, well, then I can pretty much tell anybody in this world this problem statement and they're going to understand what I'm saying. That means I've got my hook that I need to kind of talk about this to anybody. And I can go and then talk about the solution to anybody. And I can talk about my business to anybody. I can talk about what my needs are to an investor. I can bring on an investment. I can go talk to a customer about this, and I can bring on customers and so on and so forth. So this is all about starting to continue to vet out your problem statement, your solution statement, starting to continue to vet out who your customers are, validating who your customers are, and gaining more and more customers to help you build out your business. So it starts by observing, building out the idea, building out the hypothesis around what your solution is, and getting out there and experimenting and building out, what your product is and continue to refine that over and over and over again. All right. So first step, building out your hypothesis, forming a hypothesis that defines both the problem and the solution you're proposing. Simple way to frame this is to fill in the following sentence. My idea is solved blank by doing this. Form the hypothesis for problem solution to customers, right? So you want to go out there and talk to people. The first thing you want to do, though, before you do this, is go out there and validate the problem. Hey, I've done this many times, and you want to go out there and try to, and we'll talk about this more next week too, when you're doing customer discovery, going out there and saying, hey, do you have an electronic vehicle? Yes, no. Okay. So you walk to somebody and they have an electronic vehicle. What are your biggest fears about owning an electronic vehicle? Well, I have charging anxiety. Guess what? If I would have walked up to somebody and say, do you have an electronic vehicle? And they said, no. My next question is, have you ever thought about buying an electronic vehicle? The answer is no. Do you mind if I ask you one more question? Just a couple more seconds of your time. Why have you not decided to buy an electronic vehicle? I guarantee my answer is I'm going to get an answer that I want to hear, which is, well, I just don't want to have to deal with charging. Well, going back to this charging, time, I am now on to a nugget of truth that is going to give me the information I need to help me continue to validate my problem. Okay, well, just one more question. So you're saying that charging is your biggest concern. Is it the time to charge, just the hassle of charging? Well, yeah, it just seems like a hassle. Those cars only get 300 miles. And if I'm like running late, or it just seems like a real hassle. And it's like, I always see these cars, and I've seen this time and time again, where I've gone and asked two simple questions. And by the third why, I got to a point where I can't shut the person up. Like I just was going on talking about, and I've seen cars online waiting for those things. And what I just discovered was that person has a problem with charging station anxiety or charge anxiety, right? Running out of battery life on their car, which is the most common and the highest reason why people don't want to buy electronic vehicles is because they're afraid of running out of battery. They will drive a car all day long and run out of gas, but they're more afraid of running out of battery, right? So running out of charge, right? So doing this and kind of going out and starting to talk to people and validating a problem and getting more and more data around, okay, so I've talked to 10 people and 3 people have all said the same thing around charging or time to charge. And then I'm gonna go talk to another 10 people. And now I've talked to 20 people. And now in total, I've talked to 6 people. 3 of those people own EV cars. 2 of those people have charge anxiety too. So now the 6, 5 have charge anxiety, 2 of which have EV vehicles. I'm going to charge to another 10 people. And I've talked to 30 people. Now I have 4 more people. See where I'm going? Now I have 10 out of 30. 5 own EV cars. 3 that own EV cars have charge anxiety. A total of 8 have charge anxiety, so on and so forth. So I'm validating all of my data as I'm going. Then I start building in my solution. Then I go start asking questions about my solution. Okay, well, you said you have charge anxiety. What if you're able to charge your car just by merely pulling up to the charging station, and your total charge time would be 5 minutes. Oh, well, that would be a game changer, right? And that was a lot of leading questions right there, because I pretty much gave the solution, but I wanted to abbreviate this part of this conversation. The idea there is I've put myself in a position to first fact find about the information I need to validate my problem. Then I started to introduce fact finding, aka discovery, on how to find out more information about my solution to validate it. The whole time I'm building questions, a hypothesis that I'm validating and testing along the way. Then I'm going to continue to do this as I keep going. I'm going to keep defining the assumptions that I want to make, and then I'm going to continue to validate those assumptions along the way. Each time I'm going to keep isolating more and more of the truths and moving past more and more of the biases. I'm going to keep asking open-ended questions, not closed-ended questions, as long as I can, until the point where I've asked so many people, there's not anything new I'm learning, right? And then I'm going to be able to have enough data to understand that the problem statement that I started with is now refined to a point that's been validated enough that I know what the value proposition is, meaning out of talking to all those people during this customer discovery process, I know all the pain points because I validated them. And I probably discovered 50% new, if not more. I know all of the gain points, meaning I know all the things that the customer would like to have to give them more value. I've validated who my customers are, meaning I now know more than likely who would give me money if I came up with a solution. I also know where my solution stands in a level of buying behavior, that if X and Y and Z were to come to be available to that customer, that they would or could buy the product. No guarantee that they would, even if they said, take my money, because the rubber has to meet the road when you actually have the product in front of them. But at least they gave you a likelihood that they would spend the money. These are all things that I put forth in kind of a testable fashion. Then by putting myself in a position to ask people that those questions, I've tested that, and I've come out with a more proven theory of what my product and solution could be or should be, right? And then I can also, from that, which are these last 2 bullet points, I can build customer personas, meaning I can build what my prototypical customer looks like. I can say my prototypical customer looks like this, meaning they're from this geographic location or locations. They're from these demographics. They're part of these segments or groups. They are of this segment type, meaning they're segmented or diversified or niche. I can say they have these tendencies and behavioral tendencies. I can even say they have these dynamics, meaning they are married with kids between the ages of 5 and 15. And then I can also build their journey, because I've gotten so much information that I can say they start from this where they initially feel the pain, or they would like to have that gain or the solution, and they would go from here to here to here to here to finally then take advantage of the solution here, where they now have a different, value proposition and so on and so forth, right? So out of doing all that and defining all my assumptions and validating all that and coming out from the other end, I have a complete validated side of my equation that allows me to say I have a viable solution. I have a well-defined problem for that solution. I have a well-understood customer base, and I know what the value proposition is. They can go compare it against what competition's out there and figure out exactly what my unfair advantages are and how I differentiate myself from everyone else. And that's in an essence how you assess your overall viability of your business. And that's what you needed before you start kind of breaking down the unit economics to see if you can fiscally afford to build out your business, right? So that's why discovery is so important. That's why customer discovery is so important. That's why market discovery is so important. And it does take you getting out there physically to do that, right? You have to get out there and talk to people. You have to observe what's going on. You have to be where the audience is. You have to understand where the environment is, and you have to observe that environment. You have to understand what your prospective customers are. So you have to do that market research. Excuse me. So there's some things to kind of understand when you're out there. And for this process, look, I'm not asking you to go out there and put yourself into the public and go talk to 100 people. What I'd like you to do is at least talk to your peers, talk to people you know, validate your problem statement, validate your solution statement, that it makes sense to people, see where it takes you, challenge yourself a little bit, talk to some people that shouldn't know anything that you're talking about, just to see if it resonates and that your problem statement makes sense. If they go, I have no idea what you're talking about, refine what you're saying, right? Go back to the problem statement. It should be something that pretty much anyone in any audience can listen to you if they're giving you a little bit of attention and understand what you're saying. So I would like you to try to talk to 5 people about your problem statement and your solution statement between now and next week. And I don't mean your teammates. I mean, each one of you on a team, talk to 5 different people about your problem statement and your solution statement. And just see what the feedback is and see if it improves your problem statement, your solution statement. It shouldn't take more than 30 to 60 seconds to do this with those individuals. This is just going to give you a little bit of insight or a little bit of awareness what it's like to be a founder, to put yourself out there and talk to people and validate your assumptions on whether your problem statement, your solution statement is hitting the mark or not. In general, some kind of approaches to how to do this is to always be kind, always be respectful. How you approach things, you know, what you put in is what you get out. I'm always very respectful and very kind. I usually, in a very public environment, I used to go out all the time into large crowded spaces. My wife and I have done this many times. I have pictures of her with a sandwich board with signs on it, asking for people to spend 2 minutes with her in San Francisco and at the Embarcadero and at the Fisherman's Wharf. She is great at putting herself out there. Over the last few years, it's a little bit different of just putting yourself out there. Most people don't really want to talk to you. But I still talk to people. I'm the guy who strikes up conversations with people in the elevator. So for me, it's not that difficult, but I can see how it can be difficult for others. So the idea is just to be positive, to not force anything. I think a lot of times if you put yourself in that audience of where you're at, when you're talking about things, it helps. So if you're in the hospital setting, or if you're in a research setting, or if you're talking with other researchers, or if you ask someone in that space, or there's other people they can talk to. So if you're talking to the researchers, if you can ask for other colleagues, or if you can ask for your colleagues, or just anyone you know that might be in that space, just keep asking for more people to talk to. You'd be amazed at anyone you can talk to that you can still get feedback from. For these products, it might be a little bit difficult. So I'm just asking you to kind of validate the way your narrative starts to sound. When you start building out your businesses, you will find the audiences to observe. You'll find the people to talk to. But I challenge you, don't just sit in your closet or your garage and don't talk to anybody. I guarantee you'll build a product for no one. But put yourself out there. A lot of times I'll recommend coming up with a story. I'm doing a research paper. I'm taking a class. I'm building sometimes they blow them off, especially if you're saying I'm doing a survey. But if you say you're from University of Memphis, I've done this a few times, I'm doing a study, they'll give you a time of day. They'll give you a time of day, say thank you. This is a numbers game. You'll be amazed. It only takes 2 or 3 to give you the information you need, then you can kind of move on. If they talk to you for 2 or 3 minutes, you can wind up getting somebody to talk to you for like 20 minutes. And you can get a ton of information from 1 or 2 people. I usually do this over a course of 3 to 6 months if given the time. So, it's not something that generally has to happen overnight. So again, for this exercise, talk to 4 or 5 people over the next week. In general, when you're running your businesses in the real world, you can take your time, and I highly encourage you talk to at least 100 people if you're ever going to build your own business. The real number is 1,000, if you're going to ask me. 1,000 people will truly validate your business idea. If you haven't talked to 1,000 people about your business idea, you haven't talked to enough. Ask non-leading, open-ended questions. You want to allow them to say as much as they want. That's when it goes back to the inner therapist, how that make you feel, or just why do you think that happened is always a great question. And why do you think that happened? And why do you think that happened? And so what happened next? Just allowing them to keep opening up is the best route, and just taking copious notes. Like I said, how does that make you feel? Document all findings. Follow passive interest to validate or disprove your hypothesis. Don't gloss over, ignore something just because it was scary to you, because it might disprove. If you go into an exercise, I've done this several times, and you start hearing something that is going to disprove your theory, follow that thread. I always jump into that. I'm like, oh wait, let's follow that. Because if I'm going to follow something that is going to disprove myself, I want to know that really quickly. I want to get that out of the way. And if it completely invalidates everything I'm thinking, great, move that out of my head, on to the next thing, right? So that's a good thing. The 5 whys, I can't stress the importance of that simple tool. And keep going until your hypothesis is fully proven or disproven. Again, like I just said, I keep going until I have something that I'm so convinced is going to be worthwhile. And at least I can go to the next step of seeing if it's feasible or not from a technical perspective or a financial perspective, or it's something that I'm like, no, timing's not right. And then when the timing's not right, I put it to the side. And then 10 years later, I'm either going, damn it, I wish I would pick that back up, or it never comes to be. So. Okay, and then evaluate, refine, rinse, and repeat. So take what you've learned, evolve your theories, hypothesis, hit the street again, again, and again. When I said 1,000 people, that doesn't have to be in the first iteration. That could be generation 1, that could be generation 2, it could be generation 3. It could be 1,000 people for generation 1, it could be 1,000 people for generation 2. If you go through an FDA process of 510K, you might have 1,000 people in your first data study and 1,000 people in your second data study. That's going through the process over and over again. If you're talking about, testing products for your tracking, you don't want to just test your counterfeit anti-counterfeit product on one product. You want to count it on 1,000 products going in 1,000 different directions, right? That's what you're going to want to do to test your product. So you're going to want to talk to a lot of different people to get a lot of different perspectives, the same way you want to do is gathering that data. So you want to continuously rinse and repeat, kind of refine, evaluate. We talked about this last week about that really kind of crazy define, design, define, and repeat, design, define, and refine, right? So it's really crazy that it kind of starts to smooth out and kind of smooth to a smooth line. But if you don't start that cycle again, then you're not doing right by your customer of continuously improving. It's the same thing here, right? You want to keep evolving your product over and over again. You want to keep going through the discovery process over and over and over again. Okay, so that was it for discovery. Next week is going to be a fun discussion around customer. It always gets very interesting when we start talking about customer. We start talking about buying behavior, how people make buying decisions, what are their reasonings behind their buying decisions. It's a great model that I like to talk about. It's kind of enlightening and probably make you even think about how you make decisions. We'll also talk about those groupings that we talked about earlier on mass markets and crossing the chasm. We'll talk about the biases and how to look at those and how to get past your own. And it's not just about like challenging your own way of thinking. That's not it at all, actually. If it does, that's great. But it's more so about looking at the customer perspective, right? And how you have to really understand that. We'll also talk a little bit about go-to-market strategies and really finish out the whole product, solution, market, customer fit conversation, because we really want to wrap that up in the first 3 weeks, so we can kind of wrap up the first part of what your pitch is going to be, which is related to that, talking about the hook that we talked about at the very beginning, who's has a problem, who you're going to fix the problem for, what the solution is that is going to be the fix for the problem, and what the value proposition is and how you're going to go to market. Really, that's the first third of the overall pitch that we're going to pitch on demo day. Okay, so homework. All right, so I want you to create a solution statement for the innovation that you're talking about. I want you to also refine your problem statement. So what I'd like to see for next week is a really well-refined problem statement and a really well-refined solution statement, and that those two go well together. Like if I were to say the problem statement and have it flow really, really nicely in the solution statement, right? With the customer segment, like the market type, in between, but they don't have to be, when I say in between, it's like, I want you to just tell me who the market segment is, like what type of market segment is, doesn't have to be part of the statement, right? So just the problem statement, solution statement, then also tell me what you think your market segment type is, right? So if it's niche, tell me niche. If it's segmented, tell me, I'm sorry, yeah, segmented, tell me segmented. So a well-refined problem statement, a well-refined solution statement that go together, then also tell me what your customer market segment type is. That's your homework for this week. Again, due by class next week. Okay, any questions? Okay, so again, here's my email address. I will have office hours tomorrow. Send me an email or text me if you want some of that time. Happy to do it. After this meeting's over, after the video is rendered, I will upload it to YouTube either tonight or first thing in the morning. You'll have access to that tomorrow. I'll take the deck that I showed tonight. I'll also upload that tonight as well into the Google folder. As with last week, dump your homework into your team folders. If you need anything from me, reach out to me. I think that's it. I think next week we'll probably have someone on the call that's going to talk about some other events that's coming up. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have a few guest speakers. One talking about the 510K process to the FDA for the life sciences team. We'll also have someone talking about some of the other regulatory things. We'll have either myself or someone talking about intellectual property protection, which is important to know. Then we'll have myself or someone else talking about funding as well. Trying to align some of these guest speakers up. It's been a kind of a crazy scheduling situation going on this spring with a lot of people out. But we're trying to get all those things aligned. So we'll have some guest speakers over the next few weeks as well. So looking forward to that. Okay. Well, if there's not any questions, I enjoyed the session. Y'all did a great job on the problem statements. And I really appreciate the effort. If you need anything from me, reach out through email or text. It's 7:32 my time, Central Time. So you get 28 minutes back in your evening. Really appreciate it. Take care. Bye.